Welcome to this rapid, exam-focused masterclass on C1700 to C1900, medicine in 18th and 19th century Britain. Grab your notes, because we're jumping right in.
Here's our exact roadmap for today. Section 1, Cause of Disease and Germ Theory. Section 2, Edward Jenner and Vaccination. Section 3, Fighting Cholera in London. Section 4, Hospitals, Surgery, and Public Health. And finally, Section 5, Conclusion and Exam Practice. Let's go!
Cause of disease, germ theory, the turning points of the entire unit.
So, for literal centuries, medicine was completely stuck. It was paralyzed by two main ideas, miasma theory and the four humors. Miasma theory was basically this idea that diseases were spread by bad, foul-smelling air. And the four humors? Well, that suggested you got sick because your body's liquids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, were just out of whack. Doctors were essentially fighting invisible enemies while completely blindfolded. But then comes the ultimate game changer, the breakthrough that absolutely shatters those old theories in one single stroke, germ theory. In 1861, we finally get rock-solid scientific proof that microorganisms, invisible living germs, are the actual, real cause of disease and decay. It wasn't bad air, and it definitely wasn't imbalanced bodily fluids. It was germs. The absolute visionary behind this? Louis Pasteur. Remember that name. He's the brilliant chemist who finally proved to the world that these tiny living microbes were the true culprits behind disease, completely demolishing miasma theory forever. For the very first time in history, doctors actually knew who the real enemy was. And building directly on Pasteur's foundation was Robert Koch. Now, while Pasteur proved the broader theory, Koch was the guy who actively hunted down the exact bacteria responsible for specific diseases. It's like he was a microscopic detective. He successfully identified the bacteria causing anthrax in 1876, tuberculosis in 1882, and cholera in 1883. Okay, you absolutely need to write this down for your exam. Germ theory is the central cause and effect link for this entire era. Every single subsequent medical advance you'll study, whether it's new vaccines, antiseptics in surgery, or sweeping public health laws, they all depend directly on germ theory. You've got to keep that chain of cause and effect front and center in your answers. Section 2, Edward Jenner and Vaccination, Empirical Observation Before Germ Theory. Now, long before germ theory even existed, we travel back to 1796. Edward Jenner noticed something really curious. Milkmaids who caught a relatively mild disease called cowpox never seemed to catch the far deadlier smallpox. So, using pure empirical observation, he tested his theory. He deliberately infected a young boy with cowpox and then later intentionally exposed him to smallpox. And guess what? It worked perfectly. The boy was immune. But listen up, because examiners love setting this trap. Yes, Jenner created the first vaccination, but he used pure observation. He had absolutely no idea what a microbe even was, and he couldn't explain the biological mechanism behind his own success. Remember, germ theory was still 65 years away. So in your exams, do not credit Jenner with understanding how germs work. His genius was purely in observation and testing. Jenner faced some intense resistance at the time. Professional inoculators stood to lose a ton of money, and a frankly terrified public strongly opposed his methods. In fact, many people had this genuine literal fear that by putting animal matter into a human body, patients would physically sprout cow-like growths. Wild, right? Despite the widespread mockery and fear, the method fundamentally worked. And this led to a massive turning point where the British government finally stepped in to enforce a medical breakthrough. By 1840, Parliament was actually funding free vaccinations, and by 1853, they went a step further and made vaccination legally compulsory. This is a vital early example of the state taking active responsibility for public health. Section 3, Fighting Cholera in London, John Snow's 1854 Masterclass in Investigation. Fast forward to 1854. The Soho district of London gets hit by a terrifying cholera outbreak. But Dr. John Snow didn't just guess at the cause. He mapped every single cholera death in the area. By plotting these deaths on a map, he was directly challenging miasma theory using hard, undeniable statistical evidence. Snow's methodology was an absolute masterclass in scientific investigation. Step 1, he mapped the deaths. Step 2, he identified a really tight cluster of deaths centered directly around one specific location, the Broad Street water pump. Step 3, he deduced the water was being contaminated by a leaking cesspit, took his findings straight to the local council and convinced them to remove the pump handle to stop the spread.
And you know what? His empirical method collapsed the cholera outbreak almost immediately. It was a completely revolutionary moment, proving that cholera spread through contaminated water, not bad air. Actually, if you're ever in London today, you can still visit this exact site, which is marked by a memorial pump.
But here is your second major exam trap of this explainer. Snow proved how cholera spread, through dirty water. But just like Edward Jenner, he didn't know the exact germ causing the disease. He couldn't identify the bacterium itself. That specific discovery had to wait nearly 30 years for our guy Robert Koch in 1883. Make sure you highlight this key distinction in your essays. Section 4, Hospitals, Surgery, Public Health, the practical application of medical science.
During the Crimean War in the 1850s, Florence Nightingale was absolutely horrified by the filthy conditions at Scutari Hospital. By enforcing rigorous hand-washing and strict hygiene discipline, she dramatically slashed hospital death rates. And alongside her, we definitely must highlight Mary Seacole, a Jamaican healer who funded her own journey to the Crimea to set up a recovery hostel, making a totally vital contribution to frontline care.
Now beware the black period of surgery. In the 1840s, early anesthetics like ether and chloroform made pain-free surgery possible. This sounded great because surgeons could suddenly operate deeper and for much longer. But, and it's a massive but, because they weren't yet using antiseptics to kill germs, infection rates paradoxically skyrocketed. Death rates actually got way worse before they got better.
The vital solution to this terrifying surgical crisis came from Joseph Lister. Lister directly applied Louis Pasteur's germs theory to the operating theater. He realized that germs in the air were infecting open wounds, so he invented a carbolic acid spray to actively kill germs during surgery. This direct, practical application of germ theory finally brought postoperative infection rates crashing down. A real game changer.
Also, notice the critical shift in government attitudes towards public health over time. Back in 1848, the Public Health Act was merely permissive, meaning councils could clean up their towns if they wanted to, which resulted in very limited impact. But thanks to the undeniable scientific proof provided by germ theory, the 1875 Public Health Act became compulsory. Councils absolutely had to provide clean water and proper sewage systems, no exceptions. Section 5, Conclusion and Exam Practice. Linking cause and effect for top marks. Try practicing this exact question. Explain why there were rapid improvements in medical knowledge from 1850 to 1900. To score top marks, you've got to prove the chain of cause and effect. Start with germ theory providing the undeniable evidence, which then forced the government to pass mandatory public health laws, ultimately spreading life-saving interventions to the masses. Mastering this connection is absolutely key. But before we wrap up, ask yourself this. If it took humans literal centuries to realize that invisible germs were the real enemy, what medical blind spots are we currently living with today that future historians will judge us for?